It's time for another Dice Tower review with Z Garcia.
Hey everybody, today I'm taking a look at Legend of the Five Rings, the card game, which is a living card game put out by Fantasy Flight, based of course on the original game by the same name that was a collectible card game. The game is a two-player dueling card combat kind of game in which you are going to be deploying characters using cards from your hand to increase the strength of those characters, play surprises on your opponent, attack their provinces, gather the most honor, and find a way to win. Okay, so I'm going to be giving you a fairly basic overview of how the game works, and I'll see you on the other side of that to give you some more final thoughts and some opinions of what I think about this one. So to play the game, each player is going to bring to the table a pre-constructed deck of cards made up of three things. Province cards, which are these down here, from which you play cards and which your opponent is trying to attack. And then a deck of conflict cards here that are going to be your hand of cards. You will play from those. They have attachments, they have events, things like that. And then a deck of dynasty cards that you'll play out here to these provinces and deploy from there, and they're usually characters. Each player has their own setup, and you get all of this in the base set, as well as several other clans that I have set aside over here. I'm not really showing you everything, but that'll give you an idea of what you are getting. So you have the different clans there and our setup. I'm not going to be giving you a look at every part of the game. That would take quite a bit. It's a fairly complex game. I'm going to be giving you a look at a round, and that should give you an idea of some of the concepts in the game and how the game plays out. All right. So to set up the game, we have put up 4 provinces down here, 1 over here with our stronghold, and we are going to play a card face down into each of the provinces from our dynasty deck, and we are going to draw 4 cards into our hand. The objective of the game is one of 3 things. You can win by attacking your opponent's stronghold and taking it down. You can win by having 25 honor, which is these red tokens here, or you can win by having your opponent run out of honor. That's also a win. And the game is played in multiple rounds, and each one has 5 phases. All right, so we're going to go over those right now. The first phase is the dynasty phase, where you gain fate and you can play characters from your provinces. During the very first round and every round, you are going to reveal the cards that are here face up so that you know what you can play. And then we gain fate equal to the number listed on our stronghold here. It also tells us, by the way, how much honor we began with, which we have right here. And so it says 7. Every one of the ones in the base set here say 7 fate. So I grab 7 of these tokens, and my opponent does the same thing. I have a start player token right here, so I'll be the starting player. And I can now start playing characters from here to my home, just out on the board where they're actually useful. The characters have a few pieces of information. They are going to have up here a value, 2 values, this is the cost, 2 values which denote their prowess in military encounters and political encounters. And then they'll have down here a text box and a value over here as well, which might matter for a few effects in the game. So if I want to play this character, I am going to pay the cost, which is 4 of these fate tokens. You can think of these as currency. And then I can decide how many of these I want to put on the character to keep it around for longer, because if the character has none on there at all, at the end of the round it will go away. Whereas if it has some, at the end of the round it simply loses 1. So this is a countdown mechanism to keeping the characters around a little bit longer. Once they're done, they fulfill their fate, so to speak, and they move on. So I could do that. All right, let's say I did that and I put 1 on there. My opponent will do 1. I'll refill this with a face down card. We go back and forth until we both pass. And then we move on to the draw phase. During the draw phase, we are going to grab our honor dials here, and we'll select a number between 1 and 5, which is how many cards we are going to draw. So let's say we've both done that. My opponent picked 5, I picked 3. The first thing that's going to happen is we're going to draw that many cards. I'll get 3 cards from my deck. My opponent will draw 5. But they invested a lot of honor in that, and I'm going to get some of that honor. I will get the difference of the 2 dials. And so from their pool, they'll take 2 honor and give it to me. And we move on to the next phase, which is the conflict phase. We'll put these aside for now, and I can choose to start declaring attacks. So, for the attack phase, the conflict phase, each player is going to be able to declare 2 conflicts, 1 military, 1 diplomatic. And when you choose when you begin the conflict, you pick attackers, whoever is ready out here. You can choose to push them forward to declare them as attackers. And I will pick a place I am attacking, one of these 4 provinces. Be aware I cannot attack the stronghold of my opponent until I've broken several of these down here. Okay, I must have gotten through, taken them out, giving me access to their main location. So I'm going to push some characters forward. I will pick a place. I will pick a type of conflict, and I will pick an element. And so the conflicts, again, the types are political and military, but also the symbols denote a special power I will get if I can win the attack. And they might have other effects in-game as well. Starting from the defender, we'll go back and forth playing cards from our hand, adding attachments to these cards, making events happen, possibly playing new characters from the hand right into the combat, perhaps. You know, things like that. So if I want to play this card, for example, Way of the Dragon, I can play this card, pay the cost, attach it to my character. It will have some sort of text, and it also boosts the stats on that card. I would have to pay for that. And then it goes back to my opponent. Back and forth we go until we both pass in sequence, and then we see who wins. I'll compare my total in the relevant stat, in this case, combat, to theirs. If mine is higher, I win. I will get the power of Void, and I will keep this ring. If they win, they do not get the power of Void, but they do set the ring aside for now for a different effect at the end of this phase. If I beat them by enough, meaning that after I've compared my value to theirs, I have enough left over to take down the stronghold, in this case, their province rather, in this case 4, then I also break the province, we'll flip it face down, and they'll keep it there, but they'll turn it so I've denoted that I've destroyed that place. The characters come back and they bow, which means you turn them sideways like this and they are spent. And then my opponent gets a chance to declare an attack. And we will each, as I said, get to declare 1 of each kind. Or we could pass before that. Once this is all done, then we are going to move on to the next phase. And there's a couple of more things that happened at the end of this phase, but I'm glossing over that. The fate phase, in which we are going to discard characters that have no fate on them. My opponent would simply lose this card. And you would remove tokens from the ones that have some. And then we are going to add fate to whatever ring was unclaimed. If these 3 were not taken by the players, we add 1 fate to each. And when they are taken later on, whoever declares the attack gets the fate, gets that currency. All right? And then the final phase is the regroup, in which we ready cards. And we are going to discard any cards we want from our provinces that are face up and we don't think we want to deploy. So I might not be interested in this. I'll replace it with a face down card. And then finally we pass the first player marker to the other player. And we begin a new round with flipping these over, getting new fate tokens, deploying characters, possibly adding some fate tokens to them, then drawing new cards with the fate dials here telling us how much we draw and if we possibly pay the other player, and so on until the game is over. All right, so before we take a look at the target audience system that I like to use as talking points, I will mention that I'm going to be, for each one of those, I'm going to be talking about this game and the original collectible card game. And I also want to mention that I am by no stretch any expert, in the subject. I am familiar with the original collectible card game, but I will be speaking from a point of view of someone that is inexperienced in the system, really. Just sort of comparing some ideas in that game versus this game. So let's kick it off with that, okay? First of all, thematic ties. I find this game to be richly thematic. The theme is very interesting, as was the theme in the original game. Now, of course, the original game has a very long history of theme that was influenced by, tournament play and things like that. Very character and player-driven content. And I don't know if Fantasy Flight is going to do something similar with this one for those that care, but the theme is rich. It has been carefully implemented, including into the clans and on all through the artwork, all through the setting. So the rich theme is very, very apparent to me. The aesthetics in the game are spectacular. The game is extremely well made. Cards are beautifully illustrated. Components are very nice. And that's one thing that this one certainly has on the original CCG. That game was much more cluttered looking. The cards were not nearly as attractive. And if there's one thing that Fantasy Flight games can do very well, is make games that are attractive, that are pleasant to play with and look at, right? So thumbs up on the LCG here for how beautiful it is. Replayability. The replayability out of the box is not bad, but you're certainly, after playing a few times, especially if the game gets its hooks into you, you are going to want those Dynasty packs. I think that's what they're calling them in this one, the extra packs that make it a living card game. Obviously, the original game, there was a lot of content you could draw from, so the replayability there is considerably higher, right now that is. But this one I'm sure is going to get a lot of support, and again, if you get into it, you're going to want those packs, which FFG wants you to get into it and buy those packs. However, everything that comes in the base game here is fine, though you're going to have a hard time playing a game that feels fully fleshed out of a single box, out of a single starter deck here. Each deck is not going to be a complete deck out of the box, even for one player. If you have one of these and your friend who's playing against you has one, you can make pretty decent decks. Making two decks out of one box is stretching it thin, is what I'm saying. So I realize most people are okay with buying two of these to begin, but be aware you're going to feel it. And part of that is because they have to stretch it out over so many clans out of the box, and that's good. That's a lot of fan service. People identify with their clans and they want a lot of different clans, but it also means that they're stretching the components very thin as to how you get to build decks in the game. There will not be full-size decks and so on. Game length. It's definitely long. The original CCG was also a long game, and this one's also very, very long, and this is my main negative. For someone who does not care that the games are long, for someone who's already a fan of the original, I think you're going to be fine. For someone who is getting into a new living card game that has no reference point to the original, be aware it's very long. The games here, I think, are going to settle in at about 90 minutes. The games I've played so far take around 2 to 2.5 hours. So yes, it's a very lengthy, crunchy game. There's a lot going on in it, lots of special effects, long turns, tons to think about. That's good. It's also, long. And it's up to you to really decide how you feel about that. I wish it was a little shorter, a little more streamlined, but I understand that that's not the game they're making here. Ease of play, which includes fiddliness, things like that. I already talked about the deck construction, which I think adds to the ease of play, making it a little problematic. The fiddliness is not too bad. I think they've done a nice job of making sure that everything is manageable. You have two kinds of tokens, the dials, the honored and dishonored card attachments, and everything else is just sort of where you place the card. Pretty good. Not too fiddly. It could be worse, and in many collectible card games or expandable card games, it is worse. So they're not going to get knocked too much for that from me. And then lastly, tactics and strategy and luck. The game is highly tactical. There is a lot of strategy in how you build a deck as well, how you want to win. But all these things are going to get better as we go, because the game's a living card game. And every living card game, when it begins, they give you a sample, a taste of things to come. This is almost a trailer, to a movie that you might want to watch. And this is a good trailer, but it's almost it does feel like a little bit of a teaser trailer, because while they give you a lot of different clans, and it might be a great way to identify which one you want to pursue in the future as you play more of the game, there's not that many neutral cards, which you need to pad out your deck, and you are going to be playing with a fairly small pool. Again, I don't want to harp on this problem, because it will go away in a few months, that problem. They're going to start coming out with these packs of cards very quickly. and you'll have plenty of cards to play with, okay? But that's sort of how I feel about it. So tactically, it is rich and strategically rich, and certainly there is luck, but they give you a lot of tools to manipulate it, okay? The mechanics of the game, I think, have been modified in very nice ways. And I do want to talk a little bit here. I got some notes about some of the changes that they've made to the game and how I feel about them, all right? So if you'll indulge me here. A couple of things I want to talk about. The losing characters. If there's a fight for a province, in the old game, whichever side lost that fight, the characters were dead. That means if I took 5 characters up against 4 characters on your side, and somehow you beat me, I lost 5 characters and you lost none. Which could lead to a game that felt balanced on a razor's edge. Or in other words, could snowball into a problem. You know, when I wiped away 5 characters based on perhaps bad luck, perhaps a mistake, yes, then you had a huge advantage. And the system they've used to replace characters here with the fate idea is fantastic. And it's driven from a point of view of economy. You can spend more to keep them around. I like it. The provinces do not go away when they are broken. And in the old game they did, which meant, again, they had added to a snowball effect, not enough cards to bring out. If you broke another one, I had even fewer cards to bring out. So someone winning kept winning. And in this game, they've also done away with that. And then you also have a set amount of resources every round. You get those 7. There are cards that possibly interact with that and give you a little bit more, but you get a base set of 7, so you cannot get messed over by not having enough holdings to give you income, okay? And then lastly, I just want to mention overall that I find the fate dial and all of these mechanisms with the pushing your luck, with the double guessing, with all of these ideas to be something that's really adds to the feel of the game. I find it that it involves me in the game a little bit more in its setting. I mean, it's a thematic idea, this idea of I'm going to try to be honorable and bet low on this, or whether it be for a duel or for drawing cards. I'm going to try to throw my weight around and bid high and possibly be seen as dishonorable in the eyes of others. I think it adds an interesting couple of choices to the game, and I do enjoy it. I like the idea of this propelling this movement of honor between the players. The dueling in it is handled very nicely. I love when a duel gets triggered because that means I get to grab the doll again, manipulate it, and think about what are they going to do? How do I want to tackle this? I want to go in strong. Don't care if they take a bunch of my glory, but I better keep an eye on it, you know? So I find the game to be interesting. For someone who enjoys collectible card games or living card games, for someone that enjoys the complexity and crunchiness that a game like this is going to bring to the table, this is one to keep an eye on. It's a strong first showing. You can tell that care has gone into the product. It is very well presented. It is thematic. It is flavorful. It is interesting. Having said all that, a game is very complex. It's one of the crunchier collectible / living card games out there. And if you are someone who is just getting into this style of game, you might want to give it a shot first, as in play it before you perhaps go and buy it, because it's very long and it's very involved, okay? It's not necessarily one that for me I'm not frothing at the mouth for it. It's interesting, but it is sort of outside of my usual comfort zone. But I can certainly enjoy it and play it, and I have had a good time with the game so far. And so, putting all of that together into some sort of final thought here, I am going to recommend the game. Give it a play if you're not sure. If you're someone who enjoyed the original, if you are someone who is comfortable with this style of game, definitely give this a try, possibly a buy. I think you're going to like it. I really am happy with what they did to the original game here and with this intellectual property. So that's it. This one gets a seal of approval from me, folks. Check it out if it's something that is speaking to you. There we go. Legend of the Five Rings, the card game, the LCG. I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.